Okay, hello. Oh, we had 3 people, now we've got 2. We've lost someone already. Unbelievable. Okay, sorry for the little delay. 1? Gone down to 1 from 3 immediately. God damn it. Ah, okay, sorry about the little delay there. Time snuck up on me quicker than I was expecting it to. Looks like we're doing this for one person today. Okay. We just wait. Hang on. Just check audio is coming through here. Yeah, cool. Okay, still new to the streaming game. So again, with chat, it's going to be quite difficult for me to be able to monitor it or to be able to see what's going on. So if you've got an issue or whatever, and I don't see it in the chat, just message me on Facebook. I've got my phone up here. I will see it come up on there. I'm just putting a reminder. Cool. Yeah, just drop me a message on Facebook. If I don't see it in the chat, I will try and monitor if I can. Oh, I've got 2 people now. Hello, 2 people. So today we are going over this iPhone concept ad that I made. This took me about 2 days. Oh, thank you, Kieran, for being my viewer. I love you. Yeah, this took me about 2 days, mainly because I was figuring it out. And then it came, figuring out the shading and everything. But we should be able to get it done, within an hour to possibly 2 hours. We're going to be going over post as well, if we get the time. So kind of taking the render and making the final product from that. Okay, so this is the video that we're going to be doing. Cool. So that's a 15-second render. That was done in cycles. Most of the stuff we're doing today is going to be 4 cycles, but bear in mind, if you're doing this on a fairly low-powered machine, you might want to just try and stick to Eevee, because this will become a fairly intensive render. This render I sent back to Bristol for Mike to do, and it took about 8 hours to render on his PC for me. So you're probably going to want to stick with Eevee, which looks like this. Okay, let's just jump straight into the blend file and start breaking that down. Check up on the stream. 2 viewers, cool. Okay, so here's the blend file. This is it totally finished. So this is kind of the workspace I kind of stuck with for the main thing. Got my timeline down here, my graph editor here, camera view, layout view, and everything's kind of separated into collections. Okay, so we've got 2 phone models. Each of the phone models is parented to its own empty, and the empty is what's controlling the movement, not the phone itself. That's just because the phone itself is kind of separated into a few different objects. It's just easier to do it on an empty. We get more control, easier to go back and edit. Okay, each phone also has attached to it an area light here, which is giving off some light from where the screen would be. And that is parented to the phone. So if I move this empty, you can see the light goes up and down with the phone, and that's going to be shining light into the environment. We have 4 lights lighting the scene, and they're all area lights. I tend to do everything with area lights just because I find that easier to control. Got 1 at the top, 1 at the bottom, 1 coming in from the top right, and 1 from the back. So we've got a 4-point light set up there. This big cube in the middle is our volume, so essentially kind of our smoke, which is filling out the scene. If I come over to the rendered view, this is in cycles. this kind of whole haze we see down here, that's this cube. That's really easy. We're going to be going over that. It comes up better in cycles, but it does also show up in Eevee. It is there. You can see the light kind of shining through it. The light from the phones is shining through it. The light from down here is shining through it. Volume just makes everything in your renders look much, much nicer. Cool. Okay, so that's kind of our blocking. Sorry, that whole bit. Our camera is just kind of on a simple rotating animation. Oh, this is actually the shortened version. We want 1 and 255. There you go. So that's our actual animation there. So they're animated to spin up, and they kind of just miss each other as they spin up, which gives us that cool whoosh as they come up. We'll use Eevee just so you can see that whoosh. And what's really cool as well is you can see the light actually shining through the volume from the phones as they shine up, which I think is really cool. Okay, so let's jump over to the shading tab so we can see what shading we're working with. So this is our world shading. So we're going to go a bit in depth with how we're shading our actual environment today, rather than just using a simple HDRI. And then let's go to Object. This is our screen shader. So that's doing all the texturing for the screen. Pretty intense. And then we've got the rim of the phone, so that metal edge, and we've got the back of the phone, which is that glass back that iPhones have. Having a reference is always good. I kind of was constantly looking at my phone throughout this, just kind of studying it and using it as reference for all the shading and stuff. Having a real world reference or photo references is always super helpful. I don't think there's any settings we need to go over. Okay, so let's just jump straight into kind of building this from scratch. I'm going to close that and not save it because I don't want to save those changes. I've got a stream folder up here. Yeah, okay. So open up a new Blender file. And delete everything there. So A to select everything, X for delete, enter, just delete all that. I'm going to rename this collection scene, and we're going to go from there. Okay. Let me just save the file as well. So I've got that saved. Product stream. Okay. Keep opening the wrong bloody thing. Okay, so we're only going to be using one pre-made asset. You can model the phone if you want, but we're not going to be doing the modeling today because today is texturing and lighting, so we're not worrying about modeling. I've just got this iPhone FBX model, which I got from Turbo Squid, which is free. If you just search iPhone 10, then if you were to filter down to free, you've got a whole bunch of iPhone models there that you can use. You can use any iPhone you want. You don't have to stick to exactly what I'm doing. You can use any phone you want. You can model your own phone if you really want to. This is the model I'm using here. Okay, so I'm just going to import that FBX and just get started. So File, Import, FBX. Go to the location it's saved, select it, and import. And there's our phone. So it's going to come in really small, so I'm just going to scale that up. So I'm just using S to scale there. Okay. So you can see we've kind of got loads of different objects coming under this object. So this is what I mean by using a empty to control the phone. So I'm just going to make a new empty, Shift A, empty, plain axes. And that's going to come in on the world origin. I'm going to select everything, make sure that empty is the active object. Then object, parent object. You can also do Control P and now we've got everything parented to that phone. Sorry, we've got everything in that phone parented to that one empty. So I'm just going to call that iPhone .i1. Okay, so let's just block out kind of the animation part first. I'm just going to make a new camera, Shift A camera. I'm going to bring that over here and get a new space to look at the camera view so I can frame it all out. I'm just going to zero out that rotation so we're at level, and then 90, 0, 90. So I'm going to start my camera kind of here, and I'm going to bring it on a swinging path round this way. Okay. I'm also going to change my camera size, so just in the scene settings here, I'm going to knock that down to 1920 by 850, just so we get a tighter view. I'm going to lock my camera to view here, just so I can bring that out a bit. Cool. Let's make the timeline a bit bigger. Turn on auto keying and make a make a keyframe I for location and rotation. To make an empty, it's Shift A, just the same way you would add any other empty. Same way you'd add anything else, Shift A empty. So yeah, add in a location keyframe. So selecting your object, I, bring up the keyframe menu, then lock rot. And I'm going to go to about, I'm just going to go to the end of my animation, 250 frames in. Let's just leave it at that. And I'm going to go to my final position. So I'm going to bring the camera around to about here and rotate like that. Down a bit. And that's going to be my final position. So with auto keying on, that's going to have automatically made a keyframe there. Auto keying you turn on with this blue button here, and that's going to have that kind of swinging animation coming around. And you can add in a keyframe anywhere between there if you want. Cool. Okay, so now we need our phone animation. So the phone kind of swings up and rotates. So the easiest way to do that, I'm just going to duplicate, well actually no, easy way to do this. Let's bring up the restriction toggles, turn selectable on and deselect the camera, select everything else, so A to select everything else in the scene, which will only be the phone and the empty, and Shift D that over there, and now we'll have iPhone 2. Let's keep the camera locked as well. Turn off auto keying as well, so we don't accidentally make any keyframes. Let's position this phone behind that one, and we want this phone to be showing the back of the phone. So let's just rotate that all the way around that way. Cool. So looking at our animation, yeah. So that's kind of how we want that last frame to be looking. I'm going to move the phone down a bit as well, just to get a bit more movement in the frame. Okay. Remember to use the empties to control it, not the phone. If you use the phone, it will become separate. Use the empties to control. So we've got iPhone 01 and iPhone, oh bloody hell, and iPhone 2. Cool. So now we need to animate them actually kind of shooting up. Okay, so I'm just going to turn on auto keying again. I'm going to go to about 150 frames in, and I'm going to make a location and rotation keyframe there. So I and location rotation lock rot. And then we're going to go back to the start, and I'm going to just bring, with auto keying on, bring that phone down to about here, and the same with this one. So now you can see they kind of slowly shoot up. Okay, so we want them to spin as well. So we've got the rotation keyframe in at the end here, so that will be their last position. So if I come down here and go to our rotation, if I flip this phone, again using the empty to control it, by 180, then we'll get the back of the phone and that will rotate as it goes up. Okay, and now we're going to do the same with this phone at the back, except this time that's going to be negative 180 because we want that to be the back of the phone. Oh, sorry, along the Z. So negative 180. And now they flip up. And if we watch it from the top, we just want to make sure there's no clipping. Make sure they don't hit each other. Cool. So they kind of just brush past each other. If they do hit each other, just go back to your first keyframe for one of the phones and just use G to move it out the way so that it will come up and not hit the phone. Okay, so now I'm going to select both those empties and I'm going to grab that last keyframe and I'm going to bring it up to about 40 frames so it's quicker. So now we're looking at that kind of shoot up. And let's use our camera again to make it active. And I'm going to bring the camera around again as well. So that's just a bit of a quicker animation. So trim that to 180. So our whole animation is only going from 1 to 180. Cool. Nice. So that's our animation kind of blocked out. So we don't have to worry about that anymore. So let's move on to lighting. Let's just light the scene. So to do lighting, I'm going to keep this. Oh, sorry. No, we're not done with animation because we need this to be a quicker shoot up. Okay, so this will be easier if you're familiar with After Effects. I'm going to bring up a new window here, and that's going to be a graph editor. Okay, and if I highlight these keyframes, I can see that the curve of that animation. And I'm just going to grab the Bezier handle for those, holding Control so it will snap along one axis, and I'm going to bring it along like this, so it starts quick and then gets slower. So it shoots up like that. Okay, well, I've accidentally done that with only one selected. I want to do that with both. So grab both of them, grab the handle for the top, and just push it along here. So that becomes really quick at the start and then slower at the end. Whoosh. And that's how you get that kind of really quick spin up and it slow down at the end. Yeah, cool. Okay, so I can get rid of this now. Don't need that graph editor anymore. And now we can move on to lighting. Okay, so let's switch over to rendered view up here using Eevee. I'm just going to turn up my samples. You don't have to do that so I can see better in my viewport. And let's add an area light. So Shift A to bring up the add menu and light area. Scale that up, make that a bit bigger. And let's start with the backlight. So let's push that to the back and kind of rotate it to point up at an angle like that. And bring it round. You can light your scene however you want. If you want to follow exactly what I'm doing, then by all means. Cool, so that's going to be back there. And in my light settings down here, the light bulb, I'm just going to bring up the power of that to be really strong. Maybe it's, I might have to bring it a bit closer. Yeah, so about 450 watts. And if I was to look at that from the back, you can see it's lighting up that phone from there. So without the light and with the light, might have to be a bit stronger. Let's try that 650. Cool. So we can see it's getting a kind of a rim of that phone being lit up. That's going to be really handy when we have the metallic shader going over that rim. Okay, so let's just call that backlight so we know what it is. And I'm actually going to make a new collection called lights. I'm going to pop that in there. To rename it, just double click it. To add a new collection, it's this button up here. And I'm going to lock it because now it's in place. And let's make another one. So another area light. Let's scale that up. Let's move it above. I'm just using the scale options, so S and X to change the shape of that light, by the way. Bring that around here, and then let's have that kind of point down like that. Oh, I've just realized I've got auto keying on. Let's turn that off, so make sure that's not blue. Delete any keyframes you might have made. We don't want to have the lights accidentally animating. Okay, and let's crank up the power of that one. So that's going to give us our light coming down from the top. Let's have that as 450 watts. Okay. Let's make, let's just duplicate this one. So Shift-E to duplicate. I'm going to bring it round to the right side here and just rotate it around to shoot up from the right. I'm going to turn the power of that down a bit as well. Yeah, about 320. Cool. Okay. That would probably do us. We probably don't need a fourth light. You can add any light anywhere you want, obviously. It's not, you don't have to follow exactly what I'm doing. Okay, so let's, to see the effect of that better, if you come down to the world settings here, one with the world with like a cross through it, let's just bring the color of that down to flat black. And that way we can kind of see better the effect of those lights. Cool. Let's save. Let's name our lights as well. So we've got right fill, and we've got our top light. Cool. I'm going to lock all those off so I don't accidentally end up clicking them. If you don't have that, again, restriction toggle is selectable. Make sure that's on, that way you can lock stuff. Okay, and now let's start shading the world. So that we can start getting our reflections and stuff. So if you're going to be using Eevee, make sure you turn on all these settings down here. Occlusion, bloom, screen space reflections, and motion blur, just to make it look a bit nicer. And let's pop over to the shading tab. Go to rendered from look dev, and we'll just stick in the camera view. Okay, let's switch over from object to world so that we're now shading the world. You can see this is the color that we selected earlier. And you could just change that to be any color you want. And if you wanted to, that could just be your background. Nice and simple. But we're not going to do that. Let's just leave that black. In fact, let's just delete it. And let's bring in a environment texture. And this is where we're going to add in a HDRI, which is a 360-degree image, which we're going to use for lighting and reflection data. So let's open that up. And let me remember which one I used. Okay, yeah, so I have two HDRIs here that I got from Shutterstock. If you have Honey in your web browser, you can get a free 1-year trial. So you can get a free 1-year subscription to Shutterstock at the moment, where you get 10 downloads a month. And they've got loads of really cool HDRIs on there, or you can find whatever HDRI you want. So I've got this one, and I think I had another one. Oh, no, that's just a dots image. Okay, So that is, I probably should have named that. The one ending in 223. The best results you're going to get from a HDRI in this kind of scenario are ones that have abstract light effects. Anything that's kind of got a dark background but really bright lights or reflections and stuff. That's where you're going to get the best results. Okay, let's add in a texture coordinate node and a mapping node. Shift A to add nodes and then search for them. I'm going to plug generated into the vector and vector into vector. And now that allows me to kind of change the position and rotation of my HDRI. So I'm going to have it kind of like that. Okay. So now we're going to be getting the reflection data from that environment texture. But we don't want to use that because you can see it's, this one's kind of low res and I don't want that to be my background. Our background is going to be just like a gradient texture. So we've got that kind of gradient color going on in the background. And the way we can do that but still get this reflection data is by using the light path node. So this is a really cool trick, is if I take the light path node and, for example, just a background color node, and then throw in a mix shader, and put that between this, and then take the is camera ray option from the light path and plug that into the facing, it's going to make it invisible to the camera. So you can see we're going to still get our reflection data, but it's not going to be visible to the camera. You can see we're getting that blue tint in the phone. So we're still getting all the light and reflection data, but we can't see it. And that then allows us to plug in a background node here and get the color we want from the background. Nice. So instead of just using a background node, I'm going to take that background node there. I'm going to use a color ramp and I'm going to plug that in. I'm going to take the mapping as well. Oh no, we've already got the mapping, don't worry about that. And I'm just going to make a gradient in here. So let's have that as kind of a purpley color. Let's take that to sort of a reddy, and let's make that like a dark red. And let's just bring down the color, so the kind of brightness of all those as well. Don't want that to be too bright. Don't want it to be distracting. Cool. So now we're getting the reflection data from our light path node, and we're getting the kind of color in the background you want. You can use any colors, obviously. And that's kind of our shading for the world done. So we can just come back to object and let's start shading the actual phone. Now the easiest way to do this is going to be use pictures of an iPhone. So what I did is I just Google searched iPhone 10 reference image and just found an image that has the front and back of the phone. So you could use like that one, or this is the one I ended up using. These are all quite annoyingly low resolution. So something really handy that you can do, a really cool quick tip, is to upscale it. If you just search AI upscale, there's loads of free online resources where you can upload a low-res image and it will upscale it to like 4K or really high resolution. You might get a bit of artifacting, but you end up with, you know, much higher res. So you can see here, that's what it was, that's what it turns it into. Really handy piece of modern technology. So I did that. I've used that image there, and I upscaled it. So what I'm going to do is, if I just come down to my principled BSDF on the phone material, which will probably already have a material assigned to it, and add in a image texture, and we want to also add in those mapping nodes, so texture coordinate and mapping in there, and we're going to use UV instead of generated, and vector into vector, and then color into the base color of the principled BSDF. And let's open up a file. So let me just remember which one I'm using. There we are. iPhone UV upscaled copy. That one. Okay. And so you can see that's not going to look very nice at all. And that's because we need to create the UV map. So if you come over to your UV editing workspace now, and we can see how that image is being mapped. So let's just select everything on that phone. So A to select everything, and press U, project from view. And that's going to give us the shape of an iPhone, which we can then scale and match to our image. Just using your normal rotation tools, scale tools, just to make that match. And now you can see you kind of got an iPhone. So yeah, great. Okay, so let's pop over to our shading tab, because now we need to do the back of the phone. So on this object, we've got the back and the front are separated into different objects. So if we come to the back of the phone, let's first name this material phone screen. We've applied that same material to everything, and we want to separate that for the back because we need a different UV map. So what you can do is, in the materials tab, just press this button here, and that will duplicate that material and assign it to whatever you've got selected. So selecting the back of the phone, duplicate that material. Let's call that phone back. Okay, and let's just jump back over to UV editing. Let's do the same thing. So select everything, U, project from view, and let's do the exact same process for the back of the phone. And now we've got the back of the iPhone. Now we need to do the exact same process for the camera, because that's a separate object too. So select that, duplicate, and then let's just call that camera bump, and come back over to UV editing. In a flat orthographic view, select it all, A, U project from view, and let's repeat the process. So just scale that down to match your camera bump. Cool. So now we've got three materials. We've got the back of the phone, so we've got the front of the phone, the back of the phone, and the camera bump. Now we just need to go through and just assign the appropriate materials to each part. So let's select the back of this phone and just make that phone back. Camera bump, phone screen. Okay, so we need to redo the UVs for those bits. That's fine. So let's just come back to UV editing. For each part, just redo your UVs. So you project from view, scale it up, This is where UVs can be really tedious, and it can be really handy to just do it once and then duplicate it, but that's not what we did. Project and view. Cool. There we go. So now we've got, oh no. Oh, that's meant to be the front of the phone, isn't it? Not the back. Trial and error. There we go. Okay. So now if we watch animation, we've got two phones with iPhone textures on them. Okay, so we need to just quickly give this rim of the phone its own texture, because that's just going to be a metal shader. So I'm using them. Okay, yeah, sorry. Let's throw me right off. So yeah, select the rim of the phone and just make a new material and just, you know, give it like a darky color. And just call that a phone rim. So you should have 4 materials: phone back, front of the phone, the camera bump, and then the rim of the phone. And you might want to assign each of these buttons as well to the rim too, so they're not getting weird UV stretches on them. Cool. Yeah, so we've got back of the phone, sorry, the front of the phone, back of the phone, the bump, and then the rim. That's kind of all we need, because that's the only 4 textures that are on the phone. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so now it's going to come into just editing those materials to give them a better appearance. So let's start with the phone screen. There might already be a normal plugged into the normal from where you downloaded the material. You can just delete that because we don't need it. So I'm going to start with the screen, making the screen actually kind of bright as if it's emitting light. I'm just going to do that by taking 2 emission textures, emission nodes, and a mix shader. And if I take the color from the image of the screen and plug that into the facing of the mix, and then plug in my 2 emission shaders, and then use an add shader here and put that between the principled and the output, then we should, yeah, so you can see we're now getting light coming from the screen. I'm not sure why we've lost the color though. The color of the image. Why have we lost the color of the image? I'm going to have to reference back to these materials. Oh, this internet sucks. Oh, I think I've done it the wrong way around. So I think the color data, yeah, the color data needs to go into the color of the emissions, then into the mix shader, then into the ad. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So yeah, so we're going to take the color data of the image, plug that into a couple of emission nodes, throw that into a mix texture, then into an ad shader, and then mix that with the principled. And now we get light bloom coming from the screen. Great. Okay. So what's happening here, you can see we're getting emission from loads of random parts of the phone. That's just from where they're assigned to the wrong texture. So you want to just go through those and just assign them to, you know, the rim or whatever they should be. I'm just going to make them all rim. Okay, so now we've got a bright screen. And now what we need to do is just kind of make it more realistic. So it's going to blend better with the world around it. An easy way of doing that is by using an ad shader and then a Fresnel node. And what the Fresnel essentially does is make light wrap around the object in a more natural way. So you can see there it's having light wrap around the object. So we just want to kind of push that over to around there. So we're getting light wrap around the screen. Let's use another ad shader. Oh, what's happened there? Okay, that'll be easier to see in cycles because it doesn't work as well as in Eevee. So let's just, yeah, let's turn that down a bit. Okay. And then let's, in this ad shader, let's use subsurface scattering. And subsurface scattering is essentially, this is the easiest way to explain it. When light kind of shines through something and it scatters under the surface of it. So like when you put a torch through your finger and you can see it scattering under the surface or subsurface, so subsurface scattering. So we're going to add that in. Let's use color data from the image, plug that into the color. I'm just going to turn the scale down to like 0.65 or something, and add in like a little bit of texture blur. Great. But what else did we use? Wow, okay, we're getting through that much quicker than I was expecting we were to. Okay, so let's use another ad shader here. I'm going to add in a glossy texture. and that's just going to make it glossy. Let's go back to Eevee so we can see what we're doing easier. I'm going to turn the roughness down and the glossiness. The lower the roughness, the more reflective and shiny it will be. And I'm going to take color data again from the image. Cool. Okay. What else do we have? Okay. All right. So I'm also going to do what we've done in pretty much every week so far. I'm going to add in a bump node here, plug that into the normal, and then use a Musgrave texture into the height. And that's going to add in these like warbles into the texture. It might be quite difficult to see because of everything else we've done. If I was to, yeah, basically I'm just going to have that kind of like 2.5, so kind of a big scale of the Musgrave, which is like a, I don't know, kind of like a noisy texture. Turn the detail down a little bit, higher dimension, and that's just kind of sort of look like reflections over the screen. It's quite hard to see because we've done a lot else, but it's just kind of a little touch that will help sell the fact that it's a screen. Okay, so something else we can do as well that I found to be quite cool is if we take a picture like this, so kind of these RGB dots, which is obviously what powers every screen. If you take something like that, you can just drag an image straight into the shading layout, by the way. Add in a mapping node, another mapping node, plug that into the vector of the image, and then let's take the coordinates of the UV from over there into there. And then add in another add shader and plug the color data into that add shader. And you're going to get these RGB dots show up all over the screen. Okay, so using that mapping node, I'm just going to turn up the scale of those to be quite high, so like 5 by 5 by 5. So that could even still be too high. Let's try like 777. You can just go higher and higher kind of until you can't really see them, but it's there as a detail. And if we wanted to, we could also then mix this using a mix shader with the color of the actual phone image. And that way it will look like they're emitting the right color for what would be on the display. The only issue with this is that because it's mapped to the whole phone, we're getting them where there technically like isn't any screen, which is a bit annoying. I guess what you could do is isolate this whole area as a separate UV, the notch and stuff as a separate material, and just exclude this bit. Let's just clean that up. So there and there. Cool, and that is pretty much our texture for the screen. I might just quickly clean up this UV because I can see it's see it's like a kind of a little bit too big. That's better. Is it? I just don't want any of that silver because it's coming out as super shiny. That'll do. Okay. Let's take a look at that in cycles. Okay. So it's kind of from where we're running so much light through that image, it's coming out a little bit desaturated. So I might just throw in a hue saturation node at the end. Oh, into an add shader. Okay, that's not coming out too good. Oh well. We can always just go in and turn down the brightness of these emissions. Another good thing to do could be to throw in a brightness contrast node between the those dots down here, and that way you can kind of turn down the brightness of them if they're coming out as too predominant. Just make them a bit less obvious. Yeah, just like that. Okay. All right, so let's move on from the screen. Let's go to the back of the phone. We're basically just going to use a lot of very similar techniques. So I'm going to turn down the roughness of the back firstly, because it's going to be a glass back, and turn down the metallic of it as well. Okay. So let's start with an add shader, which will go into a mix of a translucent, which is just kind of slightly see-through, and a glossy. Cool, so you can see we've now got a sort of glossy, sort of see-through looking back of the phone. Kind of like glass, which has given us really nice reflection of the phone in front of it. And this is where we're going to kind of bring in the color. So I want this to be a sort of red phone, because we're kind of going for that product red advertisement. So I'm just going to make those both the a similar red color. And now we've got like a really, really reflective red back to the phone. To turn that down, we can go more towards the glossy side, which we can just use over here. Just push that more to the right, and that will go towards the one on the bottom, which in our case is glossy. There we go. So we've got a really nice glossy translucent back. Okay, I'm going to use another add shader here, where I'm going to add in a refraction node, which is just going to continue to tell, it's going to bounce the light off in a nicer way, essentially. Turn that down to like 0.145, and let's give that a red as well. Let's make it the same red, actually. You can just copy over hex values by switching between RGB and hex. You can just copy over these values, and then it'll be the exact same color. Cool. We're going to use a Fresnel in here as well. So let's take another add shader and a Fresnel node. and that's going to continue to do that light wrap thing we were talking about before. I'm going to turn that down to like 0.145. Oh, that's gone the other way. It's done the opposite of what we want. Use Eevee to speed that up. There we go. So now we're getting light wrap around the edge of the phone a bit nicer. It might just be a bit too glossy, so I can just turn up the roughness in the main principled BSDF here, just to make it slightly less reflective. And I can push this over to like 0.9, so we're kind of moving more towards glossy, and we can turn the roughness up in here as well. You can fiddle with so many of these settings to change the outcome of the material. Let's check on the stream. We've got nobody. Great. Why do we have nobody? Is the stream still live? Hang on. We are live. Okay. It's just my laptop that's freaking out. Okay. We can do the same thing down here as well with what we did before. Throw in a bump node and a Musgrave texture. Plug that into the height of the bump and then into the normal. You can see it better here. So we want a really low scale on that, like a 1.25 maybe. And we're kind of getting that look that light's bouncing off it in a weird way. Might want that even lower, maybe like 0.75. Yeah. Okay, so we've been live for just coming up to an hour now. Great. Okay, so that is a lot of our shading done. You know, the networks look really complex, but when you get into it, it's just adding stuff to stuff to stuff. Okay, let's jump back to layout then. And let's add in kind of the lights from the phones. Because though the light we're getting from the emission looks really nice in Eevee, that's because Eevee has bloom, whereas Cycles is more realistic because bloom isn't that realistic. So we're not getting that light bouncing off it. So we need to add in like an actual light to it. So we can do that really easily. We're just going to add in a area light. Let's do RX -90, RX -90. Bring it around here and up, and then let's just scale it to kind of match the size of the screen. Now I'm going to make that about 85 watts in strength. I'm going to tint it to be kind of slightly bluey. Cool. And now I'm just going to parent that to the phone null. So just select both of those, make sure the phone's active, then Control P, parent object, and bring it in, make sure it's in the right collection too. Just going to repeat that. So RX90, I'm going to bring it around to here. And now they're parented to the phones. So they'll come up and shine their light. Whoa, just so we're getting really strong refraction there. Really strong refraction. That could be from the Musgrave, so let's turn that down to like 0.25. No, it is from the refraction node. 0.25. Yeah, let's turn down the index of refraction there, so it's not as strong, but still reflective. Cool. So we've got our animation, we've got our shading. Nice. So now we're going to add in that volume. And this is really easy. All we need to do is add in a new cube, kind of scale it to fit just as much of the scene as is necessary. Yeah, as much as the camera can see, because we don't want to be rendering anything past that. Let's kind of rotate it down a bit. Okay, so that cube is going to be our volume. The easiest way of doing that is by coming to the shading tab, on your cube, make a new material, get rid of the principled, and just type in volume and take in volume, principled volume, and plug that into there. And now you can see it's coming up like fog. Turn down the density, and that will change how dense the fog is. And you can change the color too, so mine's going to be like a bluey fog. So it looks alright in Eevee, but it looks really good in Cycles, although it is a bit noisy. But the main thing is, at the moment, you can still see it's a cube. So what I'm going to do is just come over to the Sculpting tab, turn on Dynamic Topology, which is basically going to create mesh as we use a brush, and I'm just going to use my brushes to sculpt that mesh, just to give it a different shape. Turn off symmetry. Use these square bracket keys to change the size of the brush, and just sculpt in that fog. Shift will do the inverse, so it'll push it down instead of up. You've got a whole host of brushes here you can use. And that's just going to change the shape to not just be a cube that you can clearly see. Cool. Let's come back to layout. Now you can see we've got some less obviously a cube fog. Maybe bring that down a little bit, rotate it some more that way. Let's take a look at it in cycles. There we go, so we've got some really cool fog coming up there. I'm just going to turn down the density a little bit more. Don't want it to be too obvious. Kind of needs to be a background element. And what's cool about that as well is the volume will absorb light. So it'll absorb the light of the phone lights that we put there, and it will absorb the light of the area lights that are lighting the scene. Let's try and grab it. So if we grab it there, where the phones are kind of jumping up, you'll be able to see that the light is shining through the volume. Just want to make that really, really low density. Cool. What you can do as well is if you come to the material settings, so the object settings, you can change viewport display to wire, or sorry, bounds, and that way in your viewport you won't see it as a cube kind of filling up your scene, you'll just see the wireframe of it. Okay, so that is pretty much our render of the phones done. And now I'm just going to kind of show you some handy post-production tips as well. So firstly, this image, this might not be the image that you want for your phone. You might want a different image. And the easiest way of doing that is literally just taking that picture, throwing it into Photoshop, masking out this area where the screen is, just mask that out and just plop your new image in there. Save it as the same file, as the original file's name, close Blender and reopen it, and it will reload with the new one. So for me, I used this image. I just masked it out and put the new image on there. If you just have a different image that happens to match exactly, you can always just get rid of that one. And put in your new one. With a new UV map or whatever. Yeah, you might have to remap it, but the easiest way of doing it without having to remap it is to just take it into Photoshop. And I've just broken it now. Oh, that's because that's my dots, not my. It'd be this one up here, wouldn't it? Yeah. There we go. Yeah, so you can just take that into Photoshop, mask it out, put your new image in, reload the file, and then you've got your desired wallpaper. And because we've done all this with the emissions stuff coming from this color data, all the color data will update to every single one of these nodes, and the materials will all match, which is something really cool about using nodes. Okay, let's just look at that. So then, do your render. So to render it out as a video, if you come down to render settings, change to FFmpeg video, encoding, MPEG 4, whatever you want. I use perceptually lossless. You can use whatever you want. We're not using any audio. Set an output location and just render out that file. And you will end up with something like, I shouldn't have closed that. Yeah, you'll end up with something like this. Okay. And once you've done that, once you've got that render, go back and we're going to take a second render. This is in my use case anyway of wanting to change the colors, because I'm using this music that is taken from an iPhone SE ad, and it's got those 4 beats there, that where I wanted the color to change. There we go. Okay, we should be back now. Sorry, my Wi-Fi cut out for a moment. Yeah, essentially we're just going to make like a green screen version of this that we can change the color of, like this, because we don't want to have to render out 4 separate versions, because that would take ages. So just come down to your phone, and we only need to change the back. Just you can just change this to like a change these to like a yellowy or like a green color. Come down to for refraction as well, and you end up with a yellow phone instead of a red phone. Then go to your world, and just for the sake of, I might want to go back to it, duplicate your color ramp here, and just change like all these to be like a yellowy, greeny. Yeah, so now we've got like a yellowy version of it. I'm just gonna make that less dark. Turn up the strength of that. And that's just going to give us like a really flat version. Render that out, but only render like, you know, where you want the colors to change. So like, say you want it to change like at 80 frames in. Just change the start to 80 and 100 frames, whatever. Then just render that as a separate file, and you've got that version. And so you'll end up with your normal version, and you'll end up with your yellowy version. And what you can do then is open up After Effects. You can probably do this in Premiere as well, or Final Cut. I think they both have the exact same effects I'm going to be using. I'm just using After Effects because it's what I'm familiar with. This is a really handy tip for saving time in your renders, especially if you're doing stuff like this. You know, yeah, so make a new composition, matching, you know, your render size or whatever. Bring in your 2 renders. And your audio. So my audio, I think it's already in here. There it is. And then take your yellowy version to wherever your stuff's going to change. I'm going to try and just match it. Like, I think it's like there. That's not going to match perfectly because I don't have the maths in front of me. Yeah, but you would have that so it would match cut perfectly. And then add in a hue saturation effect to it. And you can just change up the hue and bang, it will change the color of like the whole render. You know, you'll get the background, the phone will change, and it will all match because we changed the phone color and the background color, so you can have a blue phone and a blue background, a green phone and a green background, purple and purple, red, I don't know, fucking colorblind, one of them, red and red, pink and pink, you know, whatever. And then to sell it more, you can add a vignette to kind of better show the lighting. Yeah, and then you can literally just duplicate that, you know, trim it, change it to purple, duplicate again, trim it over here, make this one a pink, maybe that's purple, is that like a pink, duplicate again, maybe not the effect, oh, I keep and let's make that come around. For some reason that's not changing. I don't know why it's now being a little bend. I think After Effects is just having a moment. Yeah, it's just having a moment where it doesn't want to update. Why does this always happen to me? There we go. Okay. Yeah, so you can change up this hue saturation, and then you've got your animation, and then it can match cut to your phone with all its different colors, but you've only done 2 renders. You've done your main one, and you've done your yellowy green one that you can then use for that. And then you can, from there you can also turn up your saturation. You can add in loads of different effects, whatever. Cool. And then say, you didn't want to render out in Blender, 800 frames, but your actual movement is only lasts this long. Then what you can do is you can just, time freeze on last frame, and then it will take the last frame, and when it stops moving at the last frame, it will just stick there, and bang, your render's 10 times longer. Or maybe you rendered in 30 frames a second, and now you're editing at 24, and your render feels too short, then you can stretch to 125%, and now you won't get stutters, but your render will play slower. Generally, you want to try and match the frame rates you will be working in. That's very close, isn't it? Yeah, you want to match the frame rates you're working in, but if you've rendered at 30 frames and you're now editing at 25, you can squeeze it and you'll get a longer render. And then you've got your audio. And then you can, from there just add in text, whatever, the iPhone, using whatever font you want. Shout out to Kieran for showing me this Lab Grotesque font, which is basically the Apple font. Bang, throwing some text effects on it. This isn't an After Effects tutorial, but and you've got your iPhone, and then you can make that a 3D layer if you wanted. This is why I do it in After Effects, because you could just do all this kind of stuff. Just, take the 3D rotation of it, make it match kind of like that, then have it animate to 0. And then you've got your text and it comes in a 3D way, like the phone does. And you just duplicate that. Bring it down a bit. What was it? We never change. Bring down the font. Change up the position. Push it down that way. And then you've got your animation, your changing color phones. You've got your iPhone text and your kind of whatever you want there. And then you can do all the text effects and stuff that you want. And also remember to color correct your renders, man. Like if you're going to take it into post or whatever, color correct it, because you can always make it look better. No shot is ever finished. Throw in a curves node, effect. Give it an S curve. Get that contrast up. Bring out the blues. Change it up. You're not stuck with what you get out of Blender. Look how flat that looks now. Turn on that saturation. Use them curves. Look how much better that looks. You could, throw a negative vignette on it. Bring in some bloom from the edges. Bang. Might be a bit too saturated. Look how different that looks now. Coming straight out of Blender, what we had there. Then saturate it, curves, vignette. My dog's just come in. Hi, dog. Always color correct your renders. Just do stuff with them. Just don't stop working on them. Take them out of Blender, keep doing stuff. After Effects is the best place for it. Take it into After Effects, do some work on it. Because you can always make it look better. Because Blender's not the best for everything. It's good for getting your render, but then you can always do so much more. Okay, that pretty much brings us to the end. An hour and a half. That's that's a lot shorter than I was expecting it to be. And we've got no one watching, which is cool. Okay, yeah. So I've not figured out what I'm going to do next week. I might do this car video that I posted on Instagram. This kind of way to rig a car and just make a nice little animation. I might do something more with this and do that next week, and how to get cool camera movement with it. But yeah, that's it for this week. I hope you learned some stuff. Hope you enjoyed it. I'll catch you next week.